loud. Yeah.
Right, ladies, let's clean up our act.
Okay, we are recording this session. I want to make sure the speaker, okay, speaker's out. Okay. We're just waiting on food.
That's super important.
Yeah, everybody needs to eat those cookies because I love them. So if they're left, I will be in trouble.
Yeah. I appreciate it when people make it sound like a service when I eat snacks.
Yes, it is.
Sacrificing for the Lord. That's right.
Okay, so before we start, I'd like to pray. Do that. Lord, I thank you so much for our desire to grow professionally. Lord, we just commit this time to you. I ask that you would open our hearts and minds to what you want to teach us during our time together. In your precious name, amen. Okay, I think it's important for you to know the outcome. So by the end of our time together in this interactive session, we want you, the participants, to be able to identify the value of and barriers to student engagement in the classroom, and leave with a plan to use one of the presented strategies to implement this semester. All right. I'm going to start with the questions. Let's do it. Okay, so you have some sticky notes in front of you, and we have two Post-it notes. So on one giant Post-it note, we want you to write what keeps you engaged when you're a participant. What keeps you engaged? What are barriers to your engagement? So let's do what keeps you engaged here, barriers over there. Oh yeah, why with the markers, or if you want to write with something else, and I'll put, you can do more than one.
Do you want like one idea per sticky note?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Daniel. Oh, okay.
So what keeps you engaged as a participant, and what are barriers to your engagement?
Okay, here. That is a barrier. That marker is a barrier.
We tried it that way. Oh, two barriers. Debbie is
This
not
is how we
learning
go through our
anything today.
Well, I'm helping you read out your marker. There you go.
Just one per sticky.
Yes, one per sticky, but you can have as many stickies as you like.
What does it called when we have like, I was gonna say monotone speech and presentation.
That's exactly what I was trying to say.
Yeah, but like, what does
Monotonous?
it mean to have like a presentation that's all white with just black letters? That makes more sense.
Boring.
Boring, I don't.
So you have a couple things like plain slides, maybe is one slide, but then also speaking.
Unaesthetic.
Yeah,
Is that a
that
word?
that's good.
Not aesthetically pleasing.
Non-aesthetic.
Drab.
Ugly.
Drab. That's objective.
What do you think?
Let's play 30 more seconds, right? And then
No, we're living on. I don't know.
No. Or
Separate.
right. Ooh, I didn't think about that. That's a good one. It's really often, so. Nice.
So can you read them out loud?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because that would help. So I was going to see if I would take the video around, but it'd be better if you read some.
Yeah, absolutely.
Add to yours.
Okay.
You can take that home with you if you want to add it home. Oh, I found one. I feel like purple sticky. Hey, come on in.
We're gonna.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes,
That
just for
makes me,
you.
thank you.
We're gonna be. No, I don't think you will see. Yeah, we were writing barriers to engagement and things that keep you engaged as a learner. You're right, Mark, take it once.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
we'll start with the negative and end with the positive. Shelly, you want to read the
So-
barriers?
Some barriers would be lectures that throw no variety, no pitch change, not excited, goes with monotone speech. Incoherent or hard to follow the speaker, irrelevant questions or ones repeating information already given, moving through content too quickly to understand, disorganized content, confusing talk, disconnected thoughts with content, long lectures, too many slides or too many words on slides, people who like to hear themselves talk, sleepiness, feeling tired, reading the PowerPoint, not using it to prompt discussion, and not knowing the other people. Yeah.
So really only 3 of those are like a student can affect these, right?
Yeah.
The rest are all.
Yeah.
That's a great one.
Okay, so what keeps you engaged? Moving around, good discussion questions, high energy, passion, interesting content, relatable, pause to think, digest, or practice,
It's a good one.
discussion, fascinating questions, humor, feeling connected to class and instruction, content I'm interested in, real examples, engagement, examples I can relate to. There's some patterns here, opportunities to ask questions, activities, stimulating conversation, looking at something from different perspectives, visuals, and feeling confident about the topic, and finally, challenging but fun topics. Okay, so that's the framework we want you to think about as we continue. And now we're actually going to do a little activity. So you're going to be in groups on either side, and I would like for you to put this puzzle together. And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes.
3.
Deb, you're in the middle, so.
Sure.
Oh, 1 to 0. I started it, no pressure.
Start on the edge.
How do we do this together?
Yeah.
There's no edges, sorry.
Some colors.
So we're always on the middle, green.
Go purple. It's my favorite color.
Wow. Orangish.
What's your favorite color? He's taking the blue stripes. I'm gonna give you all the blue stripes.
This looks like a.
Get it?
She's done. That's perfect.
It has a little Jesus.
Yeah.
Go ahead, do whatever you want.
too optimistic.
Daniel's a gamer, so this is gonna. Are you a puzzler too?
Not very often, but I enjoy a puzzle. It feels like a vacation.
Yeah.
We always have a puzzle at our big house.
Yeah.
We actually buy a new puzzle every time we go on vacation.
Yeah.
I got one.
Oh, good.
You're about a minute and a half in, it's about halfway.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, what is it about puzzles that are so?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Equals conversation.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, relax.
Is there anything that I could give you that would make it easier?
Yeah, sure.
The box.
Okay, the picture. Okay, I'll give you the picture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I want
the
that.
color right now.
Now you're getting over.
How cute.
Are there more pieces?
Like the edges and the corners.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's what we're not
Oh, is there one more thing I could do?
Now you're on the roll.
All right, there's one more thing.
Another success.
And you've got about a minute and a half to go, I'll extend your time.
You got boundaries, right?
Not worth that. Maybe it's pretty safe from trouble without the edges.
There we go. Here's an animation.
I like this task, ladies.
The yellow.
Which one? Black. Oh, ours were black.
That's a good idea. Oh, this is. Tardy.
You obviously stopped at the.
I did, Janelle grabbed me.
And you have to eat the leaf shaped ones, because
This must be
What
the
you-
fun.
I go for the homemade ones.
I would have known.
You can have which one? The far side. Over there. Okay, this is this.
What's here?
Bottom corner.
You've got about a minute and a half left, you extended your time.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they went to ours, so.
Bit like
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah.
That's really the.
This is just.
Here's one here.
This,
yeah.
Yeah.
Need success.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, this is below
You need
it.
success.
Don't feel any pressure at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna want to be able to finish this.
There's a lot of.
Okay, about 10 more seconds.
What?
There's gotta be more than this.
You feel like there's pieces missing?
Yeah.
5,
Here's some.
4, 3, 2, and 1.
Okay, let's see, how'd you do? Ooh, they got a.
We have two dark heads.
And
And a whole lot of.
Okay, okay. So how is this activity like an engaged classroom?
We're doing things together.
Okay.
It's doing things and together.
Yeah, it's not obvious. Like if something's too obvious, you can't be all that engaged.
I don't know about that, but.
I think it's pretty big.
Yeah.
Now, it has been a way that
Maybe there's a little curiosity.
Yeah.
there, Like, what is the point of this? Like, why?
Right.
are we doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What structure, what structure do you provide? Because without this structure, it makes it very difficult to accomplish a task. So they gotta know where they're going.
So
Yeah, that's
talk,
good.
talk to us about how you felt when you had just the inside pieces.
Wasn't worth the effort.
We have learned how this is over here.
Yeah, right.
the engineer was on the picture. I can see that. You know what I mean? Okay, I want you to think about the inner pieces as your content. You know your content. And that framework is engagement. And if we don't have that engagement, it doesn't matter how brilliant we are in our content, because we're not gonna be able to communicate it to them, right? So I also want you to think about how we just did this activity. I actually do this for with various topics. And I chose to ask you, connect it. And it's always interesting to see when we ask that open-ended question, make connections. I have students make connections I never thought of.
Right.
Sometimes I have some preconceived thoughts about what I want them to hopefully share, but I want you to think about that. We can have all the beautiful content, but if they're not engaged, we're not going to make a beautiful puzzle together as a class, right?
And just real quickly, Melissa, we use the prompt that you use this for. Will you tell them what that?
Oh, yeah. So when I do this with exceptional children, and they do it in groups, and it's actually super fun because you have those serious puzzles. Like I have students, if they don't finish, you're like, can we stay after class and finish the puzzle? You know? But I ask them what connections they can make between teaching and teaching students with disabilities. And it's real interesting, the connections they make. You know, we have students that might know a little content, but they don't have the framework. Students with disabilities don't always have the framework they need to be able to access the content, right? They have to have access and opportunities. I've done it in assessment, the assessment for special ed, talking about if we don't have the framework of assessment, we're going to have good instruction. There's just a variety of ways that you can use it. And it's very engaging. So anyway. Yeah. So let's go back to what do you know? Now connect what you said, engaged you and the barriers. How about your students? What engages your students? Is there anything different than what you said engages you or are barriers for you?
I think for my students, I teach low level students, writing students, and freshmen, like just came to Tater. And I think for them, they need more variety than I would need in terms of, I'm fine. I eat oatmeal the same every single day. You know, I'm fine. But they need more variety of, even if something's really engaging, if I do it all the time, they'll become disengaged.
I think you had a really good point, freshmen. So the engagement could be different depending on their level.
Yeah.
And knowing that as an instructor. What else?
I feel like they need to feel like they can be successful. When we didn't have the outline, I got frustrated. And to have it for Danielle, I was going to give up.
Oh, so you're like Debbie.
But I feel like a lot of our students are that way. You know, we give them a task to do, they feel like they probably just can't do it. And not really try that.
And because you said learned helplessness when I said, and it was more like, it's not worth my mental energy. I'm gonna focus that elsewhere. I mean, I could have done it, but it wasn't worth my mental energy. So it was a conscious choice.
Students do the same thing.
Yeah.
They look at the points that something's of value, like, and they figure out, is this worth the amount of time that I think I'm going to have to spend on it or not?
We're just thinking critically.
Yeah. Which is something to want to do.
Yeah, my son used to. What he needed. He's frustrated teachers.
So what are barriers for our students?
Understanding the importance.
Confidence.
Sometimes for my students, the context, because I also have a lot of international students. And so if they don't have the context for things that seem normal for our American students, then they can't move forward. And a lot of times they'll ask their neighbor for things, which I'm totally fine with. They sit with somebody they trust and they can just ask them things if they don't feel comfortable saying it out loud.
I think the questions can be a barrier, like they don't, even upper level students, I think it takes a couple weeks for them to feel comfortable to ask questions, that when they feel like, oh, this is something I probably should have known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
History, meaning historically, I've always struggled in this area or with this thing, so I'm not gonna succeed now, there's no way.
That's the
Or, I know
confidence
I
that Mark
learned this
has.
in calculus, but
Yeah.
I can't remember it, so I don't want to look stupid by asking, because
Yeah.
something I should have remembered, whatever, you know?
I was thinking sometimes a barrier for our students is when we give them open-ended things, that there's no boxes to check, they struggle because they're so used to checking boxes and doing exactly what they're told that when there's wide open, you give them basic parameters and say, okay, be creative in the middle and show me what you can do. They struggle.
Especially if they think an assessment is following that, that is going to be assessed.
Right.
Like, did I do it right? Did I?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say sometimes for students, it's connections, like how do things connect, like, you know, across classes, but within content and to themselves personally. So just making those connections of, you know, and maybe it's not just a connection of, hey, this is important because, but like, I know I'm all about connections. I'm always trying to weave things together that I hear and process. And so sometimes our students don't do that, or they do it later, or sometimes they never do it because it's, I won't see you again for 2 days. So then pulling it back in or something like that. So without those connections, it almost can seem irrelevant sometimes.
They have to have the curiosity to want to make the connections.
Mhm.
I mean, that's something we've been talking about with some of our students. They just want to know, what do I have to know? Rather than we're trying to help them make the connections and they're like, I just want to do the assignment.
For the grade.
Yeah, and for the grade.
Yeah. If you want me to, we asked our ed students what these same questions, and you have many of the answers they do. They had a few more. So things that engage them. One is the way we sit in the classroom. So like this is more engaging than if we were in rows. So they said when I can't see who's behind me talking and I only see the back of the person in front, I get more disengaged. So just how we sit, they like circles, half circles, horseshoes, whatever. They like guided group discussion where they're expected to participate. So just when you put them in small groups and then throw in that thing like, and everybody has to share at least one thing, they like that because otherwise they kind of stick back. They like kind of guided notes, they mentioned course packs, visuals. They like pictures on the, you all pull that up, pictures on the screen of something. Let's see, relating things to personal or practical content. And they said they like when they have to make an application themselves. They said, we like the prof to make an application, but we know that it's good for us to make that ourselves too. And they like to do that. They like colors. So even like color Post-it notes are more engaging than just plain Post-it notes. And they like things printed on colored paper. And they said, we know you can't print in colored ink. So, but if you could ever do colored paper, they like colored paper. So we do a lot of that in our department. We do a lot of colored paper, but they said it's more interesting. I brought crayons to class because I didn't want to spend the money on ink. So they had to color their handout. And they thought that was the funnest thing. They color these text sizes. They like teacher excitement and interest. Prompts, if they're going to watch a movie or a clip, they like a prompt first so they don't check out. And they like knowing they're going to have to share something about it or be responsible. So I think one of the things is accountability. They like some accountability to their learning, whether they're engaging or not. They like class time and kind of broken up. We call it like quiet active. So maybe 20 minutes of sitting, listening, but then you're doing something. They like that conversation between class or following up or just those casual conversations to feel like they're known. They like snacks. They said they even like if the prof says
you can bring snacks for the class as well. So if some of them like to cook and I'd like to know that I can bring snacks. Real world examples, we have that, willing to be flexible, but not a pushover. That was interesting. They like competition, they like prizes. They said it could be a bonus point, a piece of gum, whatever. They like to be forced to sit in different places and sit with different people. Use different partners, so counting off. A lot of these things where if they are not forced, they won't do it themselves. They won't go sit with someone new. They won't engage unless they kind of have to. Group work, if everyone's held accountable. They like movement, so that's why we had you walk around a little bit. And they said they like that expectation that they need to be ready and engaged. So quite a few things. And make it safe to make a mistake. So when they do engage, they don't feel bad. It's just part of the whole class. So, yeah.
How about barriers? Did you have?
Yeah, had some barriers too, ones you all said, and a lot of them are flip side, so I won't say just the opposite of what I said, but distractions like students on their computers or on phones. So they said, we feel like we want our phones connected to us, but we really know it's not helpful. So they like it when they're kind of forced. They even mentioned you.
Besides the cell phone basket.
There was some testimony there. When things aren't clear, it's kind of convoluted. If they feel like it's boring to the professor, it's going to be boring to us. So just the attitude towards our content. They said video. I thought this was interesting because I think we think they're always going to want to watch a video. They said some videos the professors could explain in a more interesting way than the video that they're seeing or watching. So they said if it's not engaging and additive, then just explain it yourself, which I thought was interesting. The same structure every day, Barb, like opposite of what you said. I can don't know every day. They like surprises. No question time during class, and then the last few minutes, and they said, and if you say we can leave unless someone has any questions, then no one wants to be that person. So there, we have actually a link to these that we collected. So over sophisticated professors, they said, we want to know if something was hard for you, or if you ever struggled with an idea or a formula or whatever it is. You don't have to just always think you know it all. So limited assessment, only tests. It's hard. And low expectations for us to engage or work hard. So they said even being told you're monitoring attendance or you're paying attention, if they participate in this, they'll participate more. So yeah, they have a lot of insight.
Okay, so I wanted to think about the instructional methods we've used already during our time. When you came in, we started out, you had to write and then get up and sit back down, and we had a group activity. Now we're talking to you. So just thinking about, which ties in really with what Carol was just sharing, what students say, what you all said, right? We don't want to sit and get, and our students don't want to sit and get, right? Okay, so we have some more to share with you. Yes, you can.
I did not print the paper. Okay, so I want to talk to you about one of my favorite instructional strategies. It is called the jigsaw method. Everybody know the jigsaw method? Yeah. Okay, so it's one that I've used in class. I mean, you know it. If you've known it and you've ever used it, you know it takes a lot of work to get ready for the jigsaw method, right? You have, sometimes it feels like hours in getting ready for the jigsaw method. So if you don't know what that is, it's like a puzzle. We did not mean for our two methods to be a pun, but it's the idea. Yeah. I'll bring that one up at the dinner table tonight. My kids will know. So it's the idea that everybody brings something to the puzzle. Like some of you just kind of jumped in. I think Mark said, well, without Danielle, I would have just given up or something like that. But the idea behind Jigsaw is that everybody learns a piece of content and they bring it back to the team in which they share. Everybody's an active piece and an active participant in the process. So if you've ever done a jigsaw, it takes a really lot of time to do. It takes a lot of time to organize. But once you've done it, it's like step back and watch the learning occur, because students take ownership of it. They really just join in. They want to be that expert of whatever it is you're having them do. And they want to be able to go back and share, and they want to be able to teach their peers. I came across this method years ago, John Hattie. So you have one of these handouts. Anybody know John Hattie?
Here.
Okay. John Hattie is one of my favorites. John Hattie is an Australian researcher who pulled together, I think hundreds of thousands of studies. And he came up with what are known as influences on student achievement. And he basically looked at all the research that was out there, did a meta-analysis of it, and pulled together. Sometimes we do things as teachers and we think, yeah, this is really good for students, but indeed it's really not. You can actually have a negative effect. And I think you all know that you can have a negative effect by the choices you make in your classroom. And so I first came across this work years ago, and I started looking at instructional strategies. Okay, so if you look, there's several sections, but in the instructional strategies section, I started looking at things that had high effect sizes. So if I do this, it's going to be this many more times effective as opposed to if I don't do this. Okay. And so the jigsaw method has a 1.2 effect size. Anything in Hattie's research, anything 0.4 or higher is a really good effect size. So when you're looking at almost 3 times that level, as far as students will achieve, so much more students will be engaged, therefore they shall achieve. The jigsaw method's pretty high on that list. So there's lots of other things that are on there. And I know when I first looked at this, I'm like, well, hey, like, you know, humor was one of them. I'm like, I'm funny. I engage with students by being funny and telling engaging stories in my class, but it only had like a 0.04 effect size or something. So it's not, I tell my students when we start looking at this in instructional methods, this is not gospel. It's not printed in the Bible anywhere. So it is a guide. Okay. And so the jigsaw method would take way too much time for us to do it in here, but I did provide some resources for you on the purple handout. This is, if you scan the QR code, there is a link to get to all of those things. I also included Hattie's stuff, and if you ever want to talk about Hattie more, I know the 3 of us love Hattie, Barb loves Hattie. There's some really good stuff in his work and in his research, and the jigsaw method is one of those methods that you truly could stand back and watch the learning happen during that time, although it's a lot more fun to jump in and learn with your students as well. But it really is it's one of my favorite strategies. So like last year in science methods, I wanted my students to explore, well, just even in methods class, I wanted them to explore 4 instructional methods. So I wanted them to look at reciprocal teaching, problem-based learning, scaffolding. And so I put them into these groups. And so they had a home group and they came together and they talked about, what do we know about these 4 things? And then, so they talked about, they activated their schema, they brainstormed a little bit. And then they said, so then they knew they were going to be going to these expert groups where they were going to learn more about this. So they had to decide, okay, who's going to go learn about what? And then, so they decided that, and then they went out. So then they went to those 4 instructional strategies and I provided materials on learning those. So I had an article, I had a video, and I had a 3rd resource. I think it was like a graphic or an image that they would take, and they were in a group of, like, let's say it's scaffolding. All of those students were learning about scaffolding together. They were learning together. They were preparing to go back to their home group and teach. So they learned about all those things. They had like a day or 2 to do that. And they came back to their home group and then they taught. And they taught all about scaffolding. Here's what it is. They found their own graphic. They taught their own peers about it. And then I said, okay, your teaching should be solid. And then I gave an assessment on that. And so then they took an assessment. So it engaged the teachers. So they knew that they were going to be ready. Because if they didn't teach well, these are pre-service teachers, if they didn't teach well, then their students weren't going to perform well on the assessment. Now the assessment was no stakes. They didn't really realize that necessarily, but it was no stakes. It was just, how did we do? And so it was that break into a group, you're accountable to each other and that kind of thing. And then they come back and they teach and they learn and they own the whole process. When I was in the classroom, I would do that a lot with, a science concept or a math concept a lot. Some of those things that I wanted to take and make more tangible for students. Because if you can teach someone else, then you know the content yourself.
Do you think the fact that your students are going to be teachers had an impact on how that turned out?
Probably, but I used to do it in my K-12 classroom a lot with 4th and 5th graders particularly. And I don't think a lot of them became teachers.
Yeah,
So,
but
it
both
was-
Carrie and I do it in 101.
yeah. But they really have to buy in and you have to like demonstrate it. And I always do it on like a fun, silly topic at first to just like almost like a get to know you or hobbies or something. This way they learn that process. So then they're ready when we start applying it to content.
You can do it with research papers too. I've done that in classes that were not education classes, like psychology classes, and they have topics, maybe 5 topics. So 4 people would do this topic and then you split them up into groups and they teach their content. So it does, even if you don't prepare for the jigsaw, you can always do some jigsaw even within the class. You know, you guys read this article, you read this one.
And I didn't know it was jigsaw, but like in my family's class, when we're talking about the influences of different therapeutic modalities, I have them break out into the decades and a group look at what was going on in the 50s, politically, socially, and then talk about what was going on in family therapy at that point in time, and then make connections. So they break it down by decades and they all do that. And then they teach the rest of the class and explain what was going on that probably influenced how people were thinking about families.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we're going to do a little activity called 30-second speech. So you're going to have 1 minute to think about what we've talked about thus far. So just to process, think about it. If you want to jot notes, you can. There's index cards. And then you're going to be with a partner, and each of you are going to have 30 seconds to share
Something we learned.
something you learned. Yep. Okay, so I always have my phone in timer and I don't have it. Anyway, okay. So you have what, this is think time. If you want to jot notes, you can.
About 20 seconds. Go ahead and finish your thoughts.
Okay, stand up with your card. Normally I would be playing music. So I'll sing. I'm not a great singer. You gotta walk around. You gotta walk around, move around. Zippity doo dah, zippity yay. My, it's a wonderful day.
When professors at Taylor are learning new things.
Zippity doo dah, zippity yay. Okay, you need to find a partner, someone you are not sitting beside. New partner.
There.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you are gonna each decide who partner A is and who partner B is. Okay, so A partners, you have 30 seconds. We're gonna tell you when your time is up, and then partner B goes. So it's time for you to give your 30-second speech. Go.
My partner.
I learned about
Oh, good thing. Talk about the weather now.
That's a normal.
I tried to, yeah.
Okay, 5 seconds. Okay, stop.
Okay, partner B.
Go.
This isn't necessarily accountability, but
Okay, go ahead and stop.
Okay, have a seat. And I would like 2 people to tell me what someone told them.
I'll go. So Debbie had a good point that one thing that really stuck with her is the idea that students wanted color and like visual stimulation as a part of what engagement looked like. Not just active, but also having colors and things like that. That's important. And maybe that was something she wouldn't have expected coming into this.
Mark brought up the point that the students want to be forced to do things. They want to be put into a position where they have to achieve something, take part in something. That was interesting.
Okay, so this is actually a research-based activity called 30-second speech. And the research is really about that social interaction piece, how important it is for our students to talk to each other about new learning. I have used this when we've done a lot of really deep content and then give them some time to process and then talk to each other about it. I've done it after a video clip. And that seems really quick, but it really means you're going to get their first response. What's their first response? And just can generate some really good conversation.
You find it interesting to see how people process?
Oh, I do.
I find it absolutely
It's very
fascinating.
fascinating. It's very fascinating. My 8 a.m., which is unusual for 8 a.m., and it's a lot of freshmen, exceptional children. I showed them a video clip, and we did not actually get through all the content because the discussion was so rich.
Yeah.
Which is so energizing, right? Yeah, and it started with the 30-second speech, and then they wanted to keep talking, so we kept talking.
And if you notice, she had people say what someone else said, so then you have to listen a little more carefully.
The first time I do that, I don't tell them I'm going to do, which I probably should have.
Oh, no.
And then they kind of freaks them out, and then they know, oh, she's going to want to, because they like to talk about themselves. Right? So they have to really listen. Yeah. Thank you.
That's good. Now, that's also a way you can start class. It's a good, I use it on I didn't think about the social side as much. I use it on the memory retrieval side. There's a lot of evidence. And so you wouldn't have an index card. I say, do not have your notes out. Just find someone and say anything you can remember from class yesterday, or anything you can remember about effect sizes, or anything you can remember about the types of experimental research, whatever it is you're talking about. Because there's something, the more we pull up from our memory without help, they find that's the best way we remember, which is super hard for me. But it gets in practice, but it also then kind of primes them into learning mode. Now we're getting class started. So if you get the engagement and you get the memory, and yeah, so good, thank you. Okay, mine here is the 1-minute preceptor. This is a new one that I have been trying. This is actually a medical, something they do in medical school. So it started like in 1992. So like nursing schools do this, medical programs. And it was spurred on by the fact that when they would be doing the residencies and things, the doctor would go in and ask the resident or the nurse or whoever was there, what's going on? What do you think needs to happen? And students were taking 20 minutes to explain the cases to them, they have to move fast. So they came up with, it's kind of a 5-minute thing. I don't know why they call it 1 minute, but it's a 5. But basically in 1 minute, you, as a student, you make a commitment to whatever you say. So this person has appendicitis or whatever it is. So whatever your content is, it could be, this is the problem with the circuit, whatever it is. I can't talk into some of your contents very well. Or this is the mistake in the problem. This is where they made the mistake in the problem. Wherever it is you want to say, but they make a commitment right away. And then they have to follow it with evidence of why they're saying this. So what drew them to that conclusion? Because a lot of times we wait for that commitment way at the end. They talk, and then they say, okay, I think it's this. This, they actually have to think about it, make that commitment. And then, so that's the first 2 steps. And I listed the steps on there. And then you step in on the next 3, or if you're doing it in partners or small groups, then the group steps in at part 3. So part 3, you would reinforce what was done well. Yes, I like how you tracked this equation. You're right. You're supposed to use, I'm going to try to throw out math terms, give me a formula. Quadratic formula. You're supposed to use that here, but you didn't apply it correctly in this spot. So you get feedback. This is what you did well. In that case, in the medical case, it might be you noticed so-and-so symptoms, but you forgot these. And then you correct errors, any errors that you noticed, but you didn't do this, or you applied this equation here, or something like that. And then you teach a general principle. Like, remember, if someone has appendicitis, they will usually have a fever, and this patient didn't have a fever or something. So when I do it, like in content, I've tried a couple things. I'm still practicing it, but it could be when we look at like assets of a child, like if you're trying to think, what are their assets that they bring to the classroom? So their commitment, you could say they have strong family support, they have community relationships, they live in a safe neighborhood, et cetera. So their commitment, okay, what are evidences of that? Then they have to do that. And then you would reinforce what they did well, yes, et cetera. You looked at that, then correct errors. They may not have strong family support, but remember they have that neighbor who is always there at all the basketball games, et cetera. You failed to mention that. And remember, then teach a general principle. Remember, sometimes an asset may not look like we think it looks. We have to ask deeper questions, and that's where you can step in and ask a new question. So you can apply it in all different ways. Todd, okay, help me say his name. You go to the Lilies. So Zachary.
Yeah.
How do you say it? Todd.
Todd.
I saw it.
Yeah,
Todd.
right.
Todd, if you go to any Lilly conference or look at that, but he actually applied it to some different areas. So even intercultural learning or implicit bias. So it can be in a lot of different settings. So it's one, especially if you're trying to find a problem somewhere, make them figure out what the solution is right away, and then why they came to that. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is this sounds like a one-on-one conversation?
Well, it can be. It can be a one-on-one. So like we could do it with teachers, like this student misbehaved while you were teaching, and you can have this conversation after. But you can also do it in partners and have students do feedback, or you could do it as a group in the back, yeah. Or maybe 2 a day, do that. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, we have one final thing. I hope you have enough index cards. Because this is actually something for us. So on your index card, we want you to write what you consider to be the most important point today and why. And you don't have to put your name on it. You're going to give it to us. Like a takeaway. Yeah. What is the most important point to you today from our session and why? And you don't have to put your name on it.
Also known as the MIP.
Also known as the MIT, most important point. And one last strategy.
Is it the same as exit tickets?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very similar.
it can actually be used as an exit ticket. Sometimes I do it at the beginning to see what they remembered from the day before. Sometimes I do it again partway through if we've had a lot. Okay, what's the most important point so far? Price an exit ticket. Yeah.
It just sounds cooler.
Yeah. The MIP. The EXIT.
Potato needs more acronyms.
Right.
Yes, we don't-
Mhm.
And really just if you have any other questions. Thank you for your time and your attention, your active participation.
Anybody want to share? Do you want to share there, Martin?
I think basically the same. I think, like, I just wrote it in more of a sentence. Students seek variety and engagement, including attention keeping, delivery, hands-on activity, but also sharing and accountability, which I didn't realize before. So those two words, you.
Anyone else want to read theirs?
Thank you, Danielle. If you could put the inner pieces of the puzzle in the bag that says I and the outer pieces in the bag that say O.
This is the last test. This is how you get out.
Yeah.
This is.
This is actually your accent check. That's right. I actually had a group one time that did not do it correctly and I did not check.
Oh.
And so actually this